I'm Donna Babylon, and I decorate with more splash than cash. You know, pillows to me is the easiest thing to update your room, and especially if you're on a budget. But I'm going to show you today how to stretch your decorating dollars even farther by making removable pillow sacks. Pillow sacks is a decorative addition to any pillow. You can have a purchase pillow or make one to match your sleeves. And it's a great way of bringing in the seasons or color changes or any kind of change you want to do. You can do celebration pillows, but it's really fun. And keeping your existing pillow still unchanged. It's just by changing the sack. Now this one I made, and I just had some ties, and I used the fabric as the statement. I didn't do anything to it because I thought this was just a fun, gorgeous fabric. However, you can get creative, and I did a couple of different sack fronts. For example, this one, I framed the same fabric, but I framed it in a coordinating fabric. This one, I added a contrasting band to the top. Again, it's bringing it, you know, if you wanted to have a collection of them. This one I did completely different, where I just took some fabric and sewed together 4 triangles. So your imagination is your limitation on these pillow sacks. But let me show you how easy they are to make. Okay, now don't worry about any of the dimensions or measurements or anything like that. They're all on the website. But basically, you choose your fabric that you want for the sack. I'm using the same fabric that I have here. And to make them stable, like I'm using quilt cottons, and I love them for the prints, but sometimes they just don't have enough body to make home decorating accessories. And this is how I work around it. I use what is called needle punch. And needle punch is a real thin batting. I like it because you don't have to quilt it very closely together. In fact, I didn't quilt it at all. And it just gives your fabric some more body so that it looks better on the pillow. So I take the pillow sack fabric, place it right sides together, and on each side of it I do have the batting. And then the secret to making a pillow that is square is not to make a square cover. Now, if you were making a pillow, a complete pillow, you would do what I'm going to do to all 4 corners. But since we're making a sack, it's only the 2 corners here. But you can see how straight across my pillow is, and I don't have any bunny ears right here, which is, you know, kind of not attractive. I use this template that is already designed, that if you can see, the corner is somewhat tapered. And that's the secret to making a square pillow. I know it doesn't make any sense, but trust me, it just works. So I put my template down and I draw it off. And I line up the 2 perpendicular sides, and then with my pen, marking pen, I mark it off. And that becomes my new pillow shape. And it also has a dot there to put for your new 1/2-inch seam allowance, and that's your corner turning point. After they're drawn, I do take my scissors and I taper it down. And so I don't get confused when I get to the sewing machine for doing that. But I taper them down, and so now it kind of looks kind of odd down here. If you can see that, it's not a 90-degree corner, but that's what you want. So with that in mind, then I sew it around, and I'm sewing 3 sides together. I backstitch at the beginning and the end, and I go down, use my new dot as my corner, and then I taper it around and just keep going. Okay, so that's my sack, and I've almost got it together. See how simple this is? Now, you need your ties. So 4 ties, I tied them in knots. You could tie them in bows if you wanted to, and I made fabric ties, but you could use ribbons, you could use any kind of trim that you wanted to make your ties from. But all I did was take a strip of fabric, and here's my strip, and I folded it in half, right sides together, and then I stitched across and down, okay, and then I turned it right side out and pressed it. So when you're adding your ties, excuse me, I take a ruler and I mark in 4 inches and open up my sleeve, and at the 4-inch mark on both sides, the ends that are open go against the seam allowance. Whoops, that's not a finished one. The ends that are open, let's see, I did this wrong once. And you put it in right here, and then you pin it. And then the other one is exactly opposite of it. And I pin that together. Now, let's just say I put the 4 ties on. Then I use a facing. And with the facing, I have serged the bottom edge. That's all I did to finish it. And I have pressed the seams open. So I stick this on the inside of the pillow, right sides together, matching the seam allowances over here. And I open these seam allowances of the pillow sack, and I pin it together. Now, I am using special decorating pins here, and I love them. They are extra long, they're strong, they don't bend, and especially when you're doing home decorating projects, many times, the fabric's thick. I've thickened this up with batting, and so your normal pins don't work, but they're long, sharp, and they just slide right in. Okay, after I've pinned this all the way around, we're going to sew this together, and I'm coming over here to the sewing machine. Now your seam allowances are 1/2 inch when you are sewing home deck, and I'm just going to slide it in here under the needle, and whoops, let me get it the right side here, and have all the edges together. I'm just going to slide it right in, and I'm going to start with my needle down, press your foot down, whoops, there we go. And I'm just going to start stitching. You stitch all the way around. Let's take out the pins before we get there. With your 1/2 inch seam allowance. And as I'm stitching around, I'm also catching those ties. Okay, let's just say I went all the way around. Now, the other thing I like to do is push the facing out away from the pillow sack, and then I like to understitch. And understitch is really a fashion sewing technique, but what I'm doing is I'm stitching the seam allowance here to the facing, and it stays tucked under easier. So basically I'm laying this down, and right along the pressed seam allowance is where I'm stitching all the way around the pillow. And you don't have to backstitch. All you have to do is stitch over some of your previous stitching. Before we turn, we want to trim our corners like this. And what that does is it eliminates some bulk so you can get in there and have a nice corner. Okay, and we're doing this side. Now again, like if you're making a pillow, you would do this to 4 corners, but just for your pillow form, the 1 corner. And so we're going to push it out. Now what I like to do is get in there with my thumbs, and I turn it out, and I use my fingernail. That doesn't always do the trick, so then I use my handy dandy point turner, which I cannot sew without. This is, I think, one of the most valuable tools you can get. I'm just pushing it out into a nice turn, nice corner. And let's get up here and I'll show you the facing as we do this. And we'll go, and if you can see, this is where I understitched it right in here. So basically that gets tucked in and pressed nicely all the way around. And we'll go back to the finished model because I think you can see it better. And then in the opening, I just slide my pillow form in, and I scrunch it in there, fill out the bottom corners, because I made this pillow because this also doesn't have little bunny ears. And I smoothed it all out, and I tied it in a square knot. If you have longer ones, you can certainly tie them into a bow if you would like to. And you have the perfect accessory for any room of your house.